The dismissal. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the typical arrogance of a 1,000-year-old civilization. Ambassador Vel of the Tarkanian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. The humans had been discovered 3 cycles ago, a primitive species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. "Another petition from the human delegation," announced Keeper Knox, his voice dripping with disdain. "They request formal recognition and protection under the Galactic Accords." The assembled representatives from across the galaxy erupted in what could only be described as condescending laughter. The Veltar, with their biomechanical enhancements, chittered in amusement. The crystalline shard lords hummed their dismissal in harmonious tones. Even the peaceful Lotus Collective, known for their diplomatic nature, seemed uninterested. "What weapons do they possess?" inquired General Crix of the militant Razor Fleet, more out of protocol than genuine concern. Vel consulted his data pad, squinting at the readings. Primitive kinetic weapons, some directed energy systems, and... He paused, frowning. "Something they call railguns." The chamber fell silent for exactly 2.3 seconds before erupting in genuine laughter. Railguns? The technology was so ancient that most civilizations had abandoned it before achieving interstellar flight. It was like bringing spears to a plasma fight. "Magnetic acceleration of metal projectiles," wheezed Counselor Rax, wiping tears from his compound eyes. "How delightfully primitive," Ambassador Vel nodded sagely. "Indeed. Their largest vessels barely reach 2 kilometers in length. Our smallest destroyers are 4 times that size. They use chemical propulsion for in-system travel, and their fastest ships require weeks to cross what our vessels traverse in days." The human delegation sat in the observation gallery, watching their fate being decided with quiet dignity. Captain Stone of the Earth Defense Force maintained his stoic expression, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. Dr. Wells, their chief scientist, took careful notes of every dismissive comment. Lieutenant Torres simply observed, her tactical mind already working through scenarios. "Their population is barely 8 billion across 12 systems," continued Vel. "Our intelligence suggests they possess no exotic matter manipulation, no gravitic weapons, and certainly no planet killers. They're essentially using oversized bullets fired by magnets." This drew another round of amusement from the assembled delegates. The concept seemed so quaint, so utterly backward. In an age where battles were fought with antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and reality-warping devices, the humans clung to the most basic principles of warfare: accelerate mass, aim, fire. Keeper Knox raised his hand for silence. "The petition is denied. Humanity lacks the technological sophistication required for council membership. Furthermore, their territory lies within the contested border zones. Should the Devourers expand their territory, humanity will serve as an adequate buffer." The casual dismissal of billions of lives didn't even register as cruel to these beings. It was simply practical. The Devourer fleet, a nomadic force of consuming machines, had been expanding rimward for decades. Every species in their path had either joined the exodus toward the core worlds or been consumed. The humans, with their primitive weapons and small numbers, would buy the council perhaps a few days when the inevitable occurred. Captain Stone stood slowly in the gallery. "Honored counselors," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We understand your decision. We ask only for one consideration." The chamber quieted, more from curiosity than respect. "When the Devourer fleet reaches our territory, we request that your long-range sensors remain active. We believe you might find the engagement educational." Vel laughed openly now. "Educational? What could we possibly learn from watching primitives with railguns face the Devourer fleet?" Stone's expression never changed. "Perhaps nothing. But if you're wrong about us, wouldn't you want to know how wrong?" The human delegation filed out quietly, leaving behind a chamber full of beings convinced of their own superiority. They had no idea that in the human databases, those primitive railguns were classified not by their muzzle velocity or projectile mass, but by a single, telling designation: their theoretical maximum acceleration. The number would have concerned them had they bothered to ask. But concern required respect, and respect required the belief that these newcomers might actually pose a threat. After all, what harm could oversized bullets possibly do against shields that could deflect antimatter and hulls that could withstand the crushing forces of artificial gravity wells? They would learn the answer soon enough. The Devourer fleet was already 3 systems away from the human frontier, and Captain Stone had not lied about one thing: the engagement would indeed be educational. First contact with death. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace with the terrible precision of a natural disaster. 37 vessels, each one a kilometers-long monument to consumption and destruction, materialized at the edge of the human system of New Terra. Their arrival sent gravitational ripples through space that every sensor within 50 light-years detected. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and largest warship. At 2.1 kilometers long, it was considered massive by human standards, yet it was dwarfed by the smallest Devourer vessel. The enemy flagship, a horrific blend of organic curves and mechanical precision, stretched nearly 6 kilometers from bow to stern. "Fleet status, Commander Park?" Brooks asked calmly. 43 vessels in defensive formation around New Terra, 26 destroyers, 14 cruisers, and 3 dreadnoughts, including ourselves. All railgun batteries are charged and ready. Park paused, consulting her displays. "Sir, we're receiving long-range sensor pings from at least 12 different Galactic Council fleets. They're watching." Brooks nodded grimly. The galaxy had come to witness humanity's final moments. Through quantum communicators, billions of beings across thousands of worlds would observe the primitive humans' last stand against the unstoppable Devourers. In the Galactic Council's monitoring stations, Ambassador Vell settled in to watch what he assumed would be a brief but possibly amusing slaughter. The humans had arranged their fleet in what appeared to be a traditional defensive formation, with their larger vessels forming a protective screen around the planet. It was tactically sound for primitives, he supposed, though ultimately futile. "Magnify the human flagship," ordered General Crix from his command ship. "I want to see these famous railguns." The image of UES Defiance filled their screens. The ship was surprisingly elegant for human construction, but what drew attention were the obvious weapon mounts. Unlike the graceful curves of energy weapon arrays or the sophisticated geometries of exotic matter launchers, the human weapons looked exactly like what they were: massive magnetic acceleration tubes designed to hurl pieces of metal at incredible speeds. "How quaint," muttered Counselor Rax. "They still use rotating turrets, like something from their industrial age." What the observers couldn't see were the specifications that would have changed their perspective entirely. Each railgun barrel was precisely machined to tolerances measured in nanometers. The magnetic field generators drew power directly from the ship's fusion cores, systems that had been over-engineered far beyond normal safety margins. Most critically, the projectiles themselves were not the simple metal slugs the galaxy assumed. Each round was a masterpiece of human engineering. A dense tungsten core wrapped in layers of specialized materials, equipped with microsensors and guidance systems that could make terminal course corrections. The manufacturing process for a single round took 6 hours and required resources that most species would consider wasteful. Humans made them by the millions. The Devourer fleet completed its system entry and began its inexorable advance toward New Terra. Their formation was a study in overwhelming force, a hammer of ships designed to crush resistance through sheer mass and firepower. They had consumed 17 species using these exact tactics. "Multiple weapon locks detected," reported Commander Park. Energy signatures indicate plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, and what appears to be some form of molecular disruptor technology. Admiral Brooks turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, what's our effective range?" "With current targeting solutions and projectile velocity. 8.7 million kilometers, sir. We can achieve first-round accuracy at that distance." On the Galactic Council monitoring stations, this exchange caused considerable amusement. 8 million kilometers? Most civilized weapons engaged at ranges measured in hundreds of thousands of kilometers at most. The humans seemed to believe they could conduct accurate fire across distances that would take light almost half a minute to traverse. Their targeting systems must be incredibly primitive if they think they can hit anything at that range, observed Keeper Knox. The Devourers will close to effective range long before these railguns can achieve meaningful damage. What the Council observers didn't understand was that human railguns hadn't been designed to fight other humans, or even other species that fought like humans. They had been designed by a species that spent centuries perfecting the art of hitting small, fast-moving objects across vast distances. Humans had been knocking spacecraft out of orbit with kinetic weapons since their early space age. It was less a military technology than a refined obsession. The Devourer fleet continued its advance, confident in their overwhelming superiority. In 18 minutes, they would enter what their tactical computers calculated as effective engagement range. The humans opened fire at 21 minutes. The physics lesson. First salvo from the human fleet created a light show that confused every observer in the system. Instead of the expected energy beams or exotic particle streams, 43 ships produced what appeared to be brief, brilliant flashes along their weapon arrays. For 0.73 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then the projectiles arrived. The lead Devourer vessel, Harvest of Worlds, had shielding designed to deflect antimatter explosions and armor that could withstand direct hits from quantum disruptors. Its defensive systems had been tested against every known weapon in the galaxy. What struck it was not exotic or mysterious. It was simply a 200-kilogram tungsten rod moving at 4.7% of light speed. The impact released energy, equivalent to a 50-megaton nuclear explosion, concentrated into a projectile smaller than a coffin. The Devourer's shields, designed to distribute exotic energy across their entire surface, simply didn't know how to handle that much kinetic force applied to such a small area. The projectile punched through the energy barrier like it wasn't there. The armor told a similar story. Composed of materials that could reform themselves after molecular disruption, the Devourer's hull was theoretically impenetrable to conventional weapons. But conventional weapons didn't typically arrive with the concentrated force of a small asteroid moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rod passed completely through Harvest of Worlds in 0.003 seconds, entering through the forward armor plating and exiting through the stern, leaving a perfectly cylindrical tunnel 2 meters in diameter. The secondary effects were catastrophic. The superheated tunnel walls created a pressure wave that tore apart internal systems, while molten metal sprayed through critical components like shrapnel. The massive vessel lurched, its forward momentum carrying it onward even as internal explosions began tearing it apart from within. On the bridge, the Devourer commander stared in disbelief at damage reports that made no sense. According to their sensors, they had been struck by a primitive kinetic projectile. According to physics, that should have been impossible at this range and velocity. Status report, barked Admiral Brooks aboard UES Defiance. Direct hit on the flagship, reported Commander Park, her voice tight with excitement. Hull breach confirmed, massive internal damage. Target is... Sir, the target is breaking apart. Across the human fleet, similar reports flooded in. Of the 43 projectiles fired in that first salvo, 39 had found their marks. The Devourer formation was in chaos, not from fear, but from fundamental confusion. Their tactical computers had no classification for weapons that could deliver this much energy purely through kinetic impact. In the Galactic Council monitoring stations, the initial reaction was stunned silence. Ambassador Vell's data pad slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. General Crix leaned forward in his command chair, studying the readings with growing alarm. "Replay that impact," ordered Keeper Knox, his voice unusually strained. The holographic display showed the moment of contact in slow motion. The tungsten projectile, invisible to most sensors due to its size and speed, struck the Devourer vessel like the fist of an angry god. The energy release was visible as a brief, brilliant flash, followed by the catastrophic decompression of the ship's atmosphere. "What was the projectile velocity?" asked Counselor Rax quietly. The Council's chief analyst consulted his instruments, then consulted them again, certain he had misread the data. "Approximately 4.7% of light speed." The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. 4.7% of light speed meant the humans hadn't just built railguns. They had built relativistic kinetic weapons. The amount of energy required to accelerate even a small mass to that velocity was staggering. The precision required to hit targets at maximum range was beyond anything the Council had thought possible with kinetic weapons. More disturbing was the tactical understanding it revealed. The humans had looked at a galaxy full of exotic weapons and energy shields and asked themselves a simple question: what happens when an unstoppable object meets a supposedly immovable force? The answer was playing out before their eyes. Energy shields were designed to dissipate energy. They had no mechanism for stopping mass, especially mass moving at relativistic velocities. Even the most sophisticated defensive systems in the galaxy were simply not designed to handle weapons that turned basic physics into a personal insult. The second human salvo fired while the Devourers were still processing the first. This time, the targeting was even more precise. The human gunners had adjusted for the enemy's evasive maneuvers and were compensating for the light speed delay in their sensor data. 22 more. Devourer vessels died in the next 4 seconds. The supposedly unstoppable fleet began to retreat. The Reckoning. The retreat of the Devourer fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy that had nothing to do with gravitational disturbances and everything to do with the complete collapse of established military doctrine. In 3,000 years of recorded galactic warfare, the Devourers had never retreated. They consumed, they adapted, or they died. But they never ran. Admiral Brooks watched the enemy vessels attempting to disengage, their formations scattered and their confidence shattered. "Pursuit course, Commander Park. Don't let them regroup." "Sir, recommend we maintain current engagement range," Park replied professionally. "Our advantage decreases significantly if they close distance." It was a tactical wisdom born from centuries of human warfare. When you hold the superior position, you maintain it. The human fleet began a methodical pursuit, keeping the Devourers at the optimal range for railgun effectiveness while denying them the close-range engagement they desperately needed. On the Galactic Council monitoring stations, the observers watched in growing horror as the humans demonstrated not just superior firepower, but superior tactical thinking. The fleet movements were precise, disciplined, and devastatingly effective. These weren't primitives firing oversized bullets. These were apex predators who had refined kinetic warfare to an art form. "They're hurting them," whispered General Crix, his tactical mind finally grasping what he was witnessing. "The humans are controlling the engagement range, forcing the Devourers to fight on human terms." Ambassador Vell stared at his displays, watching projectiles streak across millions of kilometers with unerring accuracy. How are they achieving such precision at these distances? The targeting solutions alone should be impossible. What the Council observers didn't understand was that humans had been solving these exact problems for generations. Every asteroid mining operation required precise kinetic impacts across vast distances. Every orbital construction project demanded pinpoint accuracy with high-velocity payloads. Humans had accidentally turned their entire industrial base into weapons research. The third salvo eliminated the Devourers' remaining heavy vessels. The fourth destroyed their support ships. By the time the human fleet had closed to what the Devourers considered optimal combat range, there were only 7 enemy ships remaining, and they were already crippled. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer aboard UES Defiance. "It's from the surviving Devourer vessels." Admiral Brooks raised an eyebrow. In recorded history, the Devourers had never attempted communication during combat. They spoke only through consumption and destruction. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen was disturbing even by Devourer standards, a biomechanical fusion of organic and artificial components that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. When it spoke, the voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple beings speaking in unison. Humans, we seek to understand. Your weapons violate the established parameters of galactic warfare. Brooks considered his response carefully. Our weapons follow the oldest parameters of warfare: mass, velocity, and accuracy. Perhaps your parameters were insufficient. We have consumed 17 civilizations. Their exotic weapons, their energy manipulations, their quantum disruptions, all were absorbed, analyzed, improved upon. Your kinetic weapons cannot be consumed. They cannot be adapted. They simply destroy. The admission sent another wave of shock through the Council observers. The Devourers' primary advantage had always been their ability to adapt enemy technologies mid-battle, turning each engagement into a learning experience that made them stronger. They couldn't adapt to projectiles that arrived at 4% of light speed because there was nothing to adapt to, just pure, unstoppable, kinetic energy. Surrender, Brooks said simply. Your remaining vessels will be allowed to leave this system. Your fleet will not return to human space. The Devourer commander's features shifted in what might have been confusion. Surrender is not within our operational parameters. Then you'll be destroyed. Your choice is existence or non-existence. Choose quickly. My gunners are acquiring target locks. For the first time in galactic history, a Devourer fleet chose existence. The remaining vessels transmitted their surrender and began limping toward the system's edge. Their 3,000-year reign of terror broken by beings who had discovered that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best solutions. As the human fleet maintained overwatch on the retreating Devourers, Admiral Brooks opened a channel to the Galactic Council monitoring stations. "Honored counselors," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the quantum communication networks. "I believe Captain Stone mentioned this engagement might be educational. Have you learned what you needed to know?" The silence from the council chambers was answer enough. In the space of 40 minutes, humanity had not only defeated the galaxy's greatest threat, but had done so with weapons the council had dismissed as primitive. The implications were staggering. If humans could do this with railguns, what else might they be capable of? The galaxy was about to find out. The new equation. 3 weeks after the Battle of New Terra, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with an urgency not seen in centuries. The vast chambers, usually filled with the confident posturing of established powers, now buzzed with nervous energy and whispered conversations about humanity's devastating display of military capability. Ambassador Vell stood before the assembled delegates, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching humility. The intelligence reports have been verified by 17 independent sources. Humanity has developed kinetic weapons capable of engaging at ranges exceeding 8 million kilometers with precision measured in meters. Their projectile velocities approach 5% of light speed. Keeper Knox leaned forward in his ceremonial chair. What are their total military capabilities? Unknown, Vell admitted. What we observed at New Terra appears to be standard fleet deployment, not their full military capacity. Intelligence suggests they have constructed over 400 vessels using this technology, with production facilities capable of expanding that number rapidly. The number sent a chill through the assembled delegates. 400 ships, armed with relativistic kinetic weapons, represented enough firepower to threaten any fleet in the galaxy. More disturbing was the production capacity. Humans were apparently manufacturing these vessels at a rate that would make them the dominant naval power within decades. General Crix activated his holographic display, showing tactical analyses of the human engagement. Their strategic thinking is sophisticated. They maintained optimal engagement ranges, denied the enemy their preferred combat parameters, and achieved complete tactical superiority through superior positioning and firepower. These are not primitives who stumbled upon effective weapons. These are military professionals who have refined their doctrine to perfection. Dr. Wells sat in the observation gallery once again, this time as part of a much larger human delegation. The small group of scientists and military officers had grown to include economists, diplomats, and engineers. The galaxy suddenly wanted to understand humanity, and understanding required extensive contact. The mathematical principles underlying their weapons are elementary, continued Crix. Mass times acceleration equals force. What's remarkable is their engineering execution. To achieve these velocities requires power, generation and magnetic field manipulation beyond anything we thought possible with their technology level. What the Council still didn't fully grasp was that humans hadn't just built better railguns. They had reimagined the entire concept of warfare. While the galaxy had pursued increasingly exotic weapons, humans had perfected the fundamental forces. Their ships were essentially mobile physics laboratories, capable of turning basic kinetic principles into overwhelming tactical advantages. Captain Stone rose from his seat in the gallery. "Honored counselors, may I address the assembly?" The request would have been denied 3 weeks ago. Now Keeper Knox nodded immediately. "The Council recognizes Captain Stone of the Human Defense Force." "Thank you. I want to address what I believe is the fundamental misunderstanding between humanity and the Galactic Council." Stone paused, ensuring he had everyone's attention. "You see our railguns as primitive weapons. We see them as applied physics. You see mass and velocity as crude concepts. We see them as the foundation of all force in the universe." Stone activated his own display, showing human weapon development over the centuries. Every human child learns that kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. What we've done is take that simple equation and engineer it to its logical extreme. Our weapons don't violate physics. They embrace physics so completely that they become unstoppable. Ambassador Vell interrupted. "But surely there are limitations. Energy requirements, targeting systems, manufacturing costs." Stone smiled grimly. "Our entire industrial civilization is built around precision kinetic manipulation. Every human mining operation, every construction project, every orbital facility has contributed to our weapons technology. What you see as military development, we see as the natural evolution of our entire technological base." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed effective weapons, they had structured their entire civilization around principles that happened to make devastatingly effective weapons inevitable. Keeper Knox stood slowly. "The Council must deliberate on humanity's petition for membership." He paused, then added words that hadn't been spoken in centuries. "We also formally request negotiations for mutual defense treaties and technology sharing agreements." The transformation was complete. In the space of a single engagement, humanity had evolved from dismissed primitives to potential protectors of galactic civilization. The same weapons that had shattered the Devourer fleet were now being courted as the galaxy's shield against future threats. As the human delegation filed out of the chambers, Dr. Wells leaned over to Captain Stone. "Think they finally understand?" Stone watched the frantic discussions breaking out among the various delegations. "They understand that we're not primitive. Whether they understand that we're just getting started, that remains to be seen." Behind them, the galaxy began the long process of accepting that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most terrifying. The end.